Yo guys, what is up? It's Teach here, coming at you again with another video, and you can see we are over on the Lost Island map, and we are about to do some limit testing with the Amargasaurus. Now, this guy, obviously, super awesome creature, spiky, destroyo, world, brave care, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, super cool dinosaur, very high base stats. I'm going to put some basic stats into all of its stuff, just to, get some base stuff. I just tamed this one from Wild, so if you get the imprint stats, you're probably going to get some pretty awesome stuff onto these guys. So, you can see their health goes up pretty rapidly, actually. You can get some decent health on these things. Stamina looks like it's pretty good. Weight looks like it's pretty good. Move speed increasing, that's always a good idea. So we're just going to toss those around. So now that we have this, what is this guy capable of? So he's got a basic attack. You can kind of see it's like a little knockback and a tail and a head swipe and all kinds of stuff. And it kind of depends on what you're looking at and how you attack and stuff like that. So it looks like there's a knockback universally with his head and his tail. Can't quite tell for sure. And then as soon as you right click is his special attack. He does have if you use C or your tertiary button, you're going to switch between, you can see it in the bottom left, armor breaking, cold, and heat spikes. And each one of those is going to provide you with a different function. And that's pretty neato, obviously, and that appears to be the only additional thing. Fixed movement enabled, so if you hit spacebar, you can basically walk in a straight line no matter which way you're looking, and kind of serve as a literal. Okay, so there it is. Sorry. So you turn that on and off, and it allows you to walk in a straight line versus not walk in a straight line, which basically turns you into an artillery machine, which is pretty cool. So you can walk against something like this and fire upon it. So that is all of its options. Now, how much damage do we do to structure? So I've got some structure over here, so we're going to go ahead and test it out because I am curious. So we're going to go ahead and turn on fixed movement, and then we're going to go ahead and turn on an armor spike just to launch one of those over there and show you what that does. And as you can see, it just reduces armor. There's no actual structure issues with that one. Now we're going to go and put on the heat spikes, and what happens when you launch a heat spike? And boop, it's on its way. You can see nearby impact spike refreshed, so it's a heat, so it lights things on fire. And then we've got the cold spike as well. Now the cold spike also does nothing to structures, but I just wanted to show you that for the most part. And then we're going to go ahead and switch the different types of spikes over here, and you can see that it kind of launches anything, but it doesn't really have a value against any form of structure. But you can launch them quite a distance, which is kind of the cool part. So if I was to look at a 45-degree angle, I'm going to go ahead and launch one of these guys so you can see how far you can shoot. And whoop. Heat spikes, we're just going to launch it. And it gets quite a bit of distance, and right about there. So that's what, 10 to 15 foundations right there that you can launch these things, which is pretty useful, obviously, when you think about it, because if you can keep outside of a distance of somebody and still create these fields like you see right here, if you go inside of this field, you are going to lose your armor buff, and then obviously in here you're going to have an ice buff or a cool buff, and then inside of that one you're going to have a fire buff, so that's pretty crazy stuff. Now, it does affect animals and creatures, which is pretty cool. So that armor buff is going to take down any form of saddle or armor that somebody is wearing. So if somebody's raiding you, you launch one of those armor spikes at them, they are going to be unable to, they're going to basically insta-die, because most people don't have very good tames when it comes to the actual health. They just have good saddles. So saddles are just going to get absolutely destroyed, which is awesome. Obviously, that's your call, obviously. Now I'm going to launch them at some turrets just so you can see 0 damage to turrets. Nothing changes about that, which kind of sucks. I was hoping they would be able to destroy some structure, but they're unable to do so. But it does lodge itself into things, just like you see right there, which is still pretty cool. Now, he does have a little bit of ability to soak, but it's not much because you are not protected. See how I just get shot off if it's on players only? But you can actually launch these things at other dinos, and it'll reduce their armor in general when it hits down on the ground. Now, it does do quite a bit of damage, that 443 right there. It looks like it does build on it, so it does do increased damage the more swings you take on him, so that's a good thing. I wonder if that's an exponentially increasing thing. Because notice how he's broken the armor of it, and you do more and more damage. Okay, so let's go ahead and test that versus something that's actually got a ton of health. Let's bring in a Giga and see how much damage we can do to a Giga. So you can see that swing does that break. So there's 412, 425, 438, build, actually. And it does look like he's had a slow applied to him, so that's pretty awesome. 480. Does it ever stop? 432. It did drop because I wasn't able to attack him. My goodness. So he does have that armor buff reduction there. So we're just going to try and stay right up on him here. And there is a knockback. You can do a Giga, which is kind of cool. So 434, 447, 457, 471. I wonder if it ever stops. It does cap out. So it caps out at 486, it looks like. So that's pretty neato, obviously. So that's a useful thing. It does cap. I mean, that's quite a bit of damage, though, if you think about it. And you can also launch these heat spikes over there, and you can see that he is able to take some damage off of that. And look at the damage that we're applying with him inside of it. So he is taking burn damage while in there. And there it is. Now he's on fire. So that's what I was waiting for. So this guy right here will launch a Giga and light him on fire without much of a problem. And you will just stay and continue to light while inside of that. Now, unfortunately, you can't stick it to him. I wish that was something that you could do. But unfortunately, I don't know how to actually make that happen. So you can't really stick it because it just goes through creatures. But it is pretty neat that can happen. So now we've got 691 on it because we do have a boost on him. So we've got a cold and a hot spike there. So we're going to go ahead and use our regular attack. And you can see that 388. I'm going to back up here. Let him get inside of that. And it will provide a slow for us and a freezing effect. And there it is. So he has a slow and freezing effect applied to him. See how he's got that ice slowly building up. And if he stays inside of that, he will freeze, just like that right there. And that is something that you can apply. And it does take a little bit to cool down. So that is a pretty awesome effect of this guy. Now, unfortunately, the armor reducing spikes, there's not really anything that it would do for a wild tame, simply because they don't have any form of, as you see right here, there's no form of armor on this guy. You can hear like the snap, and it does do the buff on him. So you can see that he does have no armor, or his saddle would be basically 0, but it doesn't really change anything because we're just sitting at maximum damage to a wild tame. So it only really would affect if someone had a saddle tame. But the actual flame effect is very useful because switching that up will allow you to quite literally launch fire at this guy and keep him on fire, which is huge. So as you can see, we've got that fire effect. We'll kind of drag him into this, and there he goes. And he will light on fire. You can see him start to smoke. It's not an instantaneous thing, but they will continue to get worse and worse until he lights on fire, and it does do chunks of damage at that point. And there's the fire. So he will light on fire. It just takes a little bit of time to get there. So if you were to defend your base with one of these, you could literally serve as an artillery unit and just obviously host some pretty cool stuff. I'm going to go ahead and take this guy out because he's just going to destroy my thing here. But the Amargasaurus, pretty awesome tame. It's really only an anti-tank. That's basically its use. It doesn't really have much of a use outside of that, in my personal opinion, because, well, I mean, it can't damage structure, so it's only useful in some certain situations, not all by any means, and so you kind of got to take that and use it as you will. Now, it does have some ability to gather some resources. You can see that thatch is something that it can gather pretty well. It can't gather any sort of chitin or keratin. It will be able to gather some. It's like cactus sap is not a problem for it, but thatch seems to be its main gathering resource, which is not too shabby, but I don't see it being really necessary to ever use that. So it's really just an anti-tank machine with an inability to do any structured damage. But that ability to take out a saddle is pretty huge when you're defending a base. And launching those heat spikes and lighting people on fire and that kind of stuff, that's huge. So being able to use that kind of stuff is pretty cool. So hopefully this does help you out a little bit. And this guy, pretty cool. I mean, I'd say him as a defensive dino more than an offensive dino, and pretty neat little structure to have access to. So anyways, hopefully this helps you out, and teach out.